everybody's attention is on Robert Downey Jr. as Dr. Doom, I actually think that the rumor about evil Captain America is low-key more shocking. Captain America is the beating heart of the Marvel Universe, and his moral compass is the foundation for many of the Avengers. I just find it really hard to imagine Steve Rogers being evil, but after thinking about this for countless hours and getting way too nerdy about it, I figured it out. I now know how Robert Downey Jr. is gonna turn Steve Rogers. This all has to do with an aspect of Robert Downey Jr.'s Dr. Doom plan. It has to do with how he wants to defeat the 616 heroes. And this theory ties to the most vulnerable moment in Steve Rogers' life. So I'm gonna explain it all in this video, and I think it's gonna blow your mind. But if Marvel actually does this, it's also going to break all of our hearts. Holy shit, they might be cooking with this. Let me explain. So I want to start this video by explaining the basics of why I even think this will happen and why Captain America turning to the dark side would cause a lot of other Avengers to also turn. So let's talk about evil Avengers and all of the leaks and rumors about this. There have been countless really reliable people talking about how Marvel has a plan to introduce the old Avengers, meaning from the Infinity Saga, and probably specifically meaning the cast of the Avengers from the first movie. And I have made a lot of videos about the individual rumors as they come out. I'll try to link some of them below in the description. But all you need to know for this theory is that there's a lot of rumors that the OG Avengers are coming back as evil variants. Chris Evans will be returning to the role of Captain America for Hydra Captain America. Technically, he will also play the actual heroic version of the character, but we will come to that later. So, evil Avengers, heavily rumored. Hydra Captain America, heavily rumored. This was something that happened in the comic books as well. Something fans have wanted to happen for a long time. So that's why myself and others have even been coming up with theories about this. Now let's talk about Kang and Dr. Doom and the 616 before the TVA. According to the MCU lore, there was a multiversal war a long time ago. He Who Remains stopped that multiversal war by harnessing the power of Alioth, and then He Who Remains created the sacred timeline, which was an isolated timeline which he would completely control with the TVA. Now, according to many other rumors out there, it is starting to seem like Dr. Doom might have come from the original version of the 616 from before He Who Remains remade it with the TVA. Now, my theory here is that that is why Robert Downey Jr. as Dr. Doom looks exactly like Tony Stark, because actually the Tony Stark we saw in the Infinity Saga was a Victor Von Doom variant, and He Who Remains created a scenario in which that character would be adopted by the Starks and raised as Tony Stark so that he would not become Dr. Doom. I've outlined that in many videos. You're probably aware of my theory, but the point is, even if that theory is incorrect, a lot of insiders are suggesting that Dr. Doom's motivation in Avengers Doomsday is going to be related to Kang and how Kang silenced his universe. So either way you slice it, we have Dr. Doom being motivated by the fact that his universe was downplayed and the sacred timeline was created to be like the main one. And even though it might seem obvious, what that means is that Dr. Doom is going to need to attack the sacred timeline, that the sacred timeline is essentially his target. Now, I want to take a second to talk about Captain America as a character, because this is crazier than even an evil version of Iron Man. And essentially that's what they're doing with Dr. Doom. I think it's this crazy thing where they're going to retcon Tony and that he was a Dr. Doom variant, but even if they don't do that, it's like a similar thing. But evil Captain America is way more wild. Steve is the moral bedrock of the MCU, and especially during the Infinity Saga. A lot of the Avengers come from like a mixed background, or they were sort of morally gray when they first enter, and a lot of them become heroic as a direct result of their friendship and their being in close proximity to Steve Rogers. Tony Stark is ultimately changed by his friendship with Steve Rogers. Natasha is definitely changed by her friendship with Steve Rogers. And so it's really hard to imagine Steve Rogers as evil. But if somehow Steve Rogers did become evil or flip to an organization like Hydra, a lot of other heroes would come with him. That's what happened in the comic books. It was a really interesting element of that story. In Nick Spencer's Secret Empire run, Steve Rogers basically learns that he was created by Hydra, not America. And Steve decides that the best option for humanity is if he embraces Hydra and uses Hydra to take over the world to truly create peace. And this was so wild. It's crazy because Steve literally picks up Mjolnir. Like, all these heroes kind of can't believe what's happening. They're like, dude, what? Steve's, it's got to be mind control. Something's going on. You can't possibly be working with Hydra. And then Steve is like, no, I am, and it's the right thing to do. And then he picks up Mjolnir, proving that he is worthy and that he's pure of heart in what he is currently doing. And so a bunch of characters actually join up with Steve Rogers, even if they can't quite make sense of it themselves. They're like, no, Cap, he's heroic. He picked up Mjolnir. He says this is the way to go. I'm going with Cap on this one. And the equivalent thing would happen in the MCU. If Steve Rogers turned, it would absolutely have brought other heroes to be evil. And maybe it all starts with Steve Rogers. Maybe RDJ's Doctor Doom turns Steve Rogers first, and then that creates an entire timeline where there are evil Avengers. But now's probably a good time to talk about the new information, the reveal that just happened, because there's context here. I need to sort of pull this all together. So recently, My Time to Shine Hello shared that Robert Downey Jr.'s Doctor Doom will use the fact that he looks like Tony Stark did to first present himself as an ally. That essentially, Robert Downey Jr.'s Doctor Doom will know that he looks like Tony Stark, and he might even act like Tony Stark when he first appeared. And he will be doing this to appear as an ally to get the Avengers of Earth 616 to let their guard down. So that is the new piece of information. Now, what does that mean when we put it together with the old pieces of information? Meaning the Dark Avengers rumors with all the OGs coming back as evil, and the fact that Doctor Doom will be motivated because Kang manipulated the timeline and silenced his. Well, if Doctor Doom is going to use the fact that he looks like Iron Man from 616, and he's using that fact to disarm and seem like an ally to the Avengers of the current 616, then I would assume Doctor Doom would also be the one to go out and get the dark variant of the Avengers, which is something we thought was going to happen, but this new information kind of confirms it. If you believe the rumor mill, then we were indeed right about that, and Doctor Doom is going to go out and get dark versions of the Avengers, evil Captain America on purpose. Now, maybe Doctor Doom can just go out into the multiverse and find evil variants, but I don't think that's the most useful story way to do this. I think a better way to do this would be to have RDJ's Doctor Doom create the dark versions of the Avengers. And essentially, Doom could be doing something similar to the time heist from Avengers Endgame. In Avengers Endgame, the Avengers go back in time and visit nostalgic and cool moments from the Infinity Saga. This was really cool from a story perspective, but it was also just fun for the audience to go back to these cool moments. Well, I think they will do the same thing with Doctor Doom, and he will go back to iconic moments within the Infinity Saga, and he will turn the Avengers to the dark side. And part of the reason I believe this is because of an old rumor I heard that in Avengers Doomsday, we will see RDJ's Doctor Doom in Iron Man 1. That RDJ's Doctor Doom is somehow present in Iron Man 1. Now, when I first heard that, I sort of imagined him just witnessing the events of Iron Man 1. Maybe he was just looking through the TVA, or maybe he was dreamwalking into Tony and was just witnessing the events of Iron Man 1. But now with all this Dark Avengers stuff, I'm starting to think that Doctor Doom goes to Iron Man 1 and literally kills Tony Stark, creating a whole new branched timeline. But because it's a branched timeline of the 616, it would be very similar to the 616. That would allow RDJ's Doctor Doom to revisit iconic moments from the Infinity Saga films. And I think that would be perfect for the audience. And I have heard that the Russos are aware that they can use elements and things that happen in Infinity War and Endgame in these next two Avengers movies, and they will still work. And it's not going to feel as gimmicky because at this point it's been 5 to 6 years since Infinity War and Endgame. Another reason that this would be really cool is that this would match what's currently happening in the Ultimates right now. The Ultimates currently is a side universe to the 616 Marvel Comics universe, and a character known as the Maker, who is an evil version of Reed Richards from the original version of the Ultimates universe. It's like a whole nerdy thing. Evil Reed Richards basically creates a whole new timeline, a whole new universe that is an offshoot of Earth 616. And yet, the Maker manipulated all sorts of things within that timeline, like preventing Peter Parker from being bitten by the spider, stuff like that. And it created a whole new timeline, and he was able to manipulate it by just adjusting all of these things that he knew was going to happen. Maybe the evil Doctor Doom, the RDJ Doctor Doom, is going to start with Steve Rogers in this newly created branch timeline of 616. And if he can get Steve to flip, he can get a bunch of them to flip. Okay, so now you fully understand exactly why I think this is going to happen this way. Well, how would Doctor Doom get Steve Rogers to flip? Well, I think he would find Steve at his most vulnerable moment. And this was, of course, when he sat down with Peggy Carter in The Winter Soldier. This scene absolutely broke all of our hearts. It's Peggy Carter, it's Steve Rogers, it's Steve talking about his moral dilemma. He's just not sure who the bad guys are. And so he doesn't know who he's really fighting for anymore. He's just at this really weird, morally gray space. And he is heartbroken because he's having yet another moment with a woman that he loves as he's watching her slip away to an illness right in front of him. And so what I think is going to happen is they will play this exact scene, except that Robert Downey Jr. will be there with Steve Rogers. And maybe it'll be the case that he's acted like Tony Stark and Steve knows him, or maybe he'll be a complete stranger to him. Either way, I think Victor Von Doom will reveal to Steve Rogers in that moment that this suffering with Peggy was created by somebody. That this entire universe and all the pain and all of the morally gray things that Steve is dealing with right there in that moment, all of that was a script written by somebody who didn't care about people like you, Steve, and people like me. And then I think Doctor Doom will offer to Steve Rogers that if he does what is necessary, together, they could recreate the timeline and give them everything they ever wanted. And because Steve is at his lowest, I think this will work. And that will be the thing that causes Steve Rogers to turn evil, become Hydra Cap, take over that entire planet, and then they take their army of Dark Avengers to take over the sacred timeline and to create Battle World. Oh my God, can you imagine if that's what it is? If we see Robert Downey Jr. go to that moment where Steve is with Peggy, and that's the moment where he pushes him to the dark side. Oh, of course, it's just a theory, but man, I've been thinking a lot about these very questions when it comes to the Secret Wars film and Doomsday and just the whole multiversal thing. And one of the big questions for me was like, how would Cap turn? Because Cap, he doesn't turn. But this would make sense. If he turns this way, I would understand it. Let me know what you think about this in the comment section below. And as I always say, I hope you are having an awesome and a nerdy day. And I'll see you in the next video.